Welcome to the Wisdom That Breathes channel. Across all our platforms, we try to share wisdom which is relevant and accessible to everyone. But on this particular platform, we go deeper into some of the ancient principles found within the scriptures. If you find some of the terminology difficult or inaccessible, then go over to our Keshava Swami YouTube channel where you'll be able to find other content which is perhaps more relatable. Thank you and enjoy the wisdom that breathes.
Sadhguru Prabhu, and thank you to all the devotees. Always an honor to be with all of you, such thoughtful, sincere and learned Vaishnavas. It's our great fortune. So today, yes, we'll be reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto number 3, chapter number 5, text number 24. And today is also the disappearance of Jiva Goswami, as I understand, also in Africa.
I am not sure.
Not sure? Okay. Where I am in the world it is. Okay, maybe we can also discuss something about Jiva Goswami, who's such a...
Yes, it is here in the US, but I believe it is for Africa also.
Oh, okay. Yes, you're in the US, of course. Yes. Okay. Yeah, so we'll discuss a little bit about Jiva Goswami as well, and then I'll leave time for just to have discussion and kind of take it from there. I don't know for my pronunciation. Om Jnana Dhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yata Padakamalan Shri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Varijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Sadhguru Prabhu, maybe before we read the verse, I can just share some slides just to contextualize things, and then I'll put the verse up myself.
Yes, Maharaj. Thank you.
I'll just share my screen.
Okay.
So yeah, as you all know, many of you, that sometimes before I give class, I like to just give some contextual understanding of where we are in the Bhagavatam, because that helps us to kind of appreciate a little bit more. So yes, where are we in the Srimad Bhagavatam? We are in the third canto of the Bhagavatam, which is a very substantial canto, a canto which is very long, a canto in which you find the sweetest of the sweet. You find right in the beginning of the third canto, which all of you have been reading, the pastimes of Krishna discussed between Uddhav and Vidura. And then straight away you find the very strong and analytical knowledge of the Mahatattva and how creation takes place. So it's a very interesting canto. So as all of you know, the Bhagavatam has 10 topics. Atra sargo visargascha stanam poshanamutaya manvantere shanukatha nirodha muktir ashraya. So it's explained that different, in one sense, the commentators say that every single canto has some element of all the topics, and therefore you can't exactly map one topic to one canto. But Sridhar Swami, in his commentary, he says that you can actually see there is an emphasis in each canto. And what he says is that in Canto 3, the emphasis is Sarga, the first topic, elemental creation. In the fourth canto, we hear about Uttanapad, Priyavrata, and we hear about the progeny which comes from Brahma, Svayam Bhagavan Manu, and their children. So it's Visharga. Fifth canto, we know, is a lot about the planetary systems. We hear about the different distances between planets. We hear about the hellish planets. And then six is all about Poshanam, because protection. We hear about how Ajamil is protected. We hear about how Vritrasura is protected. And then seven is Uti, creative impetus, because this canto is all about Hiranyakashipu. And the creative impetus behind the whole world is lust. Because of lust, Pumshastriya Mituni Bhavametam, because of lust, so many things are created. Ato, Griha, Kshetra, Sutapta Vider, Janasya Moho, Yamahamma Meti. The home, the family, children, material arrangements, and ahamma meti, a sense of I and mine, all coming from lust, characterized by Hiranyakashipu. The eighth canto is like a day in the life of Manu, because you hear about all the different Manus. And then the ninth canto we say is Ishanu Katha, because there you hear about Parishuram, there you hear about Ram, and there you also hear about the family which leads up to Krishna's appearance. And then the 10th canto is all about Krishna, and so naturally Ashraya. And the 11th canto is all about Krishna instructing Uddhav in how to release himself from material entanglement, and he's preparing Uddhav for sannyas, and therefore the 11th canto is said to be about mukti, and the 12th canto is all about nirodha, because there we hear about the annihilation of the universe, and we hear about ultimately Parikshit's annihilation as he gets bitten by the snake bird. So then one may ask, what do the first two cantos represent? According to Sridhar Swami, the first canto is all about Adhikar, because we're hearing different conversations, the conversation between Sukadev and Parikshit, the conversation between Sutta and the sages, we're hearing the conversation between Narada and Vyas. And in these conversations, we're hearing what is the qualification of a speaker and what is the qualification of a hearer. Because before you can even hear Bhagavatam, you have to make sure that the speaker is qualified and the listener is qualified. And the second canto is all about sadhana, because here we hear about all the ways in which one can connect to the Supreme and how bhakti is the ultimate means of connection. So dear friends, this is an entire overview of the Bhagavatam. And today we are reading from the third canto. And now I've given you an overview of the 12 cantos of Bhagavatam. Let me give you an overview of the third canto of the Bhagavatam. And it's very easy. If you remember the word saves, you can remember the entire Bhagavatam, third canto. S stands for stories of Krishna, because in the beginning of this canto, we hear about how Vidura and Uddhav are having a conversation, and they're recounting all the stories of Krishna. Krishna in Vrindavan, Krishna outside of Vrindavan. And in 4 chapters, they have very beautiful exchanges where they're talking all about Krishna and remembering him. Then in the next part of the canto, Uddhav tells Vidura, if you want to know more, then out of etiquette, I should guide you to Maitreya. Maitreya knows more than he's my elder, so you should go and hear from him. And so Vidura goes to Maitreya, and they begin speaking about the assembly and activation of the universe. Sometimes people ask, after hearing about Krishna, why did Vidura then go to Maitreya and start talking about such technical matters? And Srila Prabhupada writes actually in the 5th chapter of the 3rd canto, the reason why Vidura asked Maitreya such technical questions. Prabhupada says, because for the living entity which is stuck in this world, it's definitely beautiful to understand all about Krishna, but it's also very much necessary to understand the predicament of where they are and why they are here. And in today's verse of the Bhagavatam, this is exactly what we're going to learn about. The 3rd part of the canto, V stands for Varahadev, because then we hear about how the universe, which we've heard all about, was sinking into the nether regions, and Varahadev appeared from the body of Svayam Bhagavan, and Varahadev appeared, and through Varahadev the universe was saved from Brahma's nostril. And then we hear about Kardama Muni and Kardama and Devahuti, and how they expand the living entities. And then we hear about Kapila Dev instructing his mother Devahuti. So therefore, saves. This is one way in which you can remember the 3rd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And here again, just another chart shows that actually the Bhagavatam we are hearing is the conversation between Sutta and Shaunaka. But Sutta and Shaunaka are reciting the conversation which took place between Sukadev and Parikshit. And Sukadev and Parikshit are narrating many, many other conversations which took place historically. And of those conversations, the one that we're hearing right now between Vidura and Maitreya is perhaps the longest conversation outside of Sukadev and Sutta's conversations, of course, in the Bhagavatam. So this conversation goes on for nearly the entirety of 2 full cantos. And of course, in this conversation, many other conversations are referenced and narrated. So yes, with that slight introduction of where we are in the Bhagavatam, let's go ahead and read today's verse from Srimad Bhagavatam. So today we're reading from canto number 3, chapter number 5, text number 24. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Sava esha tada drishta na pashya drishyamekadat mene shantam ivatmanam shukta shaktir ashukta drik. Synonyms: Sa, the personality of Godhead; Va, either; Esha, all these; Tada, all at that time; Drashta, the seer; Na, did not; Apashyat, see; Drishyam, the cosmic creation; Ekarat, undisputed proprietor; Mene, thought like this; Ashantam, non-existent; Iva, like that; Atmanam, plenary manifestations; Shukta, unmanifested; Shakti, material energy; Ashukta, manifested; Drik, internal potency. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation: the Lord, the undisputed proprietor of everything, was the only seer. The cosmic manifestation was not present at that time, and thus he felt imperfect without his plenary and separated parts and parcels. The material energy was dormant, whereas the internal potency was manifested. It's a very beautiful purport. The Lord is the supreme seer because only by his glance did the material energy become active for cosmic manifestation. At that time, the seer was there, but the external energy over which the glance of the Lord is cast was not present. He felt somewhat insufficient, like a husband feeling lonely in the absence of his wife. This is a poetic simile. The Lord wanted to create this cosmic manifestation to give another chance to the conditioned souls who were dormant in forgetfulness. The cosmic manifestation gives the conditioned souls a chance to go back home, back to Godhead, and that is its main purpose. The Lord is so kind that in the absence of such a manifestation, he feels something wanting, and thus the creation takes place. Although the creation of the internal potency was manifested, the other potency appeared to be sleeping, and the Lord wanted to awaken her to activity, just as a husband wants to awaken his wife from the sleeping state for enjoyment. It is the compassion of the Lord for the sleeping energy that he wants to see her awaken for enjoyment like the other wives who are awake. The whole process is to enliven the sleeping, conditioned souls to the real life of spiritual consciousness, so that they may thus become as perfect as the ever-liberated souls in the Vaikuntha Lokas. Since the Lord is Sachit Ananda Vigraha, Brahma Samhita 5.1, he likes every part and parcel of his different potencies to take part in the blissful rasa dance, rasa, because participation with the Lord is in his eternal rasa lila, is the highest living condition, perfect in spiritual bliss and eternal knowledge. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So this is a very, very beautiful purport, because in this purport here, remember, if you remember, the second canto is talking about assembly and activation of the universe. And what's very, very beautiful about the Bhagavatam is it doesn't just tell us how the universe was assembled and activated, but perhaps more importantly for us, what the Bhagavatam tells us is why the universe was created. So, how the creation took place is definitely described, because in these verses of the third canto, we hear about the different material elements and how from Mahatattva there is different evolutions up to the building blocks of the universe that we see today. And it's very, very technical and not easy to understand. But that explanation of how the universe came about is very, very lucidly explained. And it's very interesting if you see how the Big Bang and how singularity is described. Of course, in the Big Bang, we know about how the scientists say all matter was created in a single, was concentrated in a single point at a superheated temperature. And from there was an explosion. And then there was an evolution of different things to the universe, to the planets that we see now. And if you see the description of that, earth, water, fire, air, ether, how the elements came about, it's actually incredibly similar to how elemental creation is described in the Bhagavatam. And so, just like the scientists are out there trying to explain how the universe came about in technical terms, the Bhagavatam also describes how the universe came about. And perhaps on another time I can show you the similarities between that. Maybe at the end of this session I'll show you. But the special offering of the Bhagavatam is it doesn't just tell us how the creation came about, but it also tells us why the creation came about. In philosophy, this is known as teleology. The reason why things happen. And therefore, what you'll see is that this is where science comes to its limitation, because science can never ever really tell you why something happens. At best, what science can do is they can tell you how things have come about. And Aristotle, the great Greek philosopher, he talked about how in the world now, scientists try to reduce the question of why to the question of how. For example, if they say, now we know why the sky is blue. Now, the best that science can do is maybe teach you in some way how the sky is blue because of elements. But the scientists can never teach you why the sky is blue, because that's a matter of purpose. That's a matter of meaning. That's a matter of philosophy. And that science can't deal with. Or for example, if I say, now I know why you're on the call today, because you've got an iPad and you could log on to the Zoom call because of the devices that you have. Yes, that's how you got on today. But that's not why you got on. You came onto the call for something more than just that. That doesn't describe the purpose behind it. And so in today's purport, what Srila Prabhupada is expanding upon is not so much how the creation came about, although that is discussed, but more importantly, why the creation was manifested. And so, dear friends, this is the difference between science and spirituality. They are dealing in different domains. Science improves things. Spirituality improves people. Science teaches us how to do things better. Spirituality teaches us how to do better things. Science can teach you about the how and the what, but spirituality teaches you about the why. Science can teach you and improve products and processes, but spirituality deals with philosophy and purpose. And so, no matter how well science may be able to explain how the creation came about, what they can never do is explain why the creation comes about. And that is the great offering of spiritual tradition, and specifically Srimad Bhagavatam. So why does the creation come about? In this purport, Srila Prabhupada is explaining because it's an opportunity for the conditioned souls to go back home, back to Godhead. Giriraj Maharaj asked Srila Prabhupada, why did Krishna create this world? And Prabhupada looked back at him and said, because you wanted it. In other words, we wanted independence. Krishna creates the world, and he creates the world in such a way that it awakens us to the understanding that this is not the world that we're supposed to be in. And therefore, this world, as Prabhupada explains, is an opportunity for the conditioned souls to go back home, back to Godhead, to enter into the rasa lila. If we were to look at the philosophies of the world, then this is one way to divide the philosophies of the world. If we say this world and if we say the spiritual world. Now, on one extreme, people think this world to be real. And on the other extreme, there are philosophies which see this world as unreal. And then there are philosophies which see the spiritual world as real. And there are philosophies which see the spiritual world as unreal. And these four positions are the four broad positions, you could say, of how to look at this world. So the first one in this bottom right quadrant is what we call materialism. They see this world as real. What you're seeing surrounded by us, it's real, it has purpose, it has meaning. But the spiritual world, there's nothing beyond it. This is it. This is everything, guys. And just try to have a good time here. Because this is it. Eat, drink, be merry, enjoy. As Richard Dawkins, the atheist professor, he used to have a bus and he used to write, there's probably no God. So now just enjoy life and have a good time. So this is materialism. Yet the spirit soul wants to have paradise. The spirit soul wants to have bliss. And so what we try to do in this world is we try to create a technological paradise, or we try to create a fictional paradise. We try to create a technological paradise by inventing so many things that seemingly make our lives so much better. And we try to create a fictional paradise by creating all types of entertainment, music, videos, TV, and so many other things which kind of place us in a happier mood. But the net result of all of these is that it leaves us dissatisfied. And therefore, the materialistic position leaves people perpetually dissatisfied because they're trying to find paradise in the in this world, neglecting the idea that paradise is actually beyond this world. And therefore, the Christian philosopher C.S. Lewis, he says, if I find in myself a desire which no experience of this world can fulfill, I must conclude that I was made for another world. But the materialists, they reject the idea of another world, and therefore they remain perpetually dissatisfied. This world is real, but the spiritual world is unreal. Now, the second position here is perhaps the darkest position, and this is known as nihilism. Nihilists, and it's very difficult to find a real nihilist at the moment. They say probably one of the closest philosophers to nihilism is Friedrich Nietzsche. But nihilism is basically the philosophical position that this world is unreal, this world is meaningless, this world has no purpose, you can't find any knowledge here, there's no point of morality here, and this world is just suffering. And if you try to remove the suffering, then there's more suffering. So nihilists believe that this world is unreal, and they believe that the spiritual world is also unreal. And therefore, for nihilists, the only question really is that when should I end my existence? Because there's nothing to look forward to. There's no hope. There's no movement forward. There's no purpose, no meaning, either in this world or in the world beyond. And therefore, this is a very, very dark position to be in. Nihilism. And then there are people who believe the spiritual world to be real, but they believe this world to be unreal. And who are they? Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. That is the position of impersonalism. They believe Brahma Satya, the spiritual world is true, and Jagan Mithya. This world that we're living in now is just false, it's unreal. is just an illusion. It's all Maya. And therefore, when we're out of the illusion, then we'll realize that none of this is actually real. And therefore, sometimes this kind of philosophy can lead to an apathy towards the world, because the world is ultimately unreal, and the world has it has nothing to offer us, and therefore is only about the spiritual world. But the philosophy of the Bhagavatam is not any of these three. Rather, the philosophy of the Bhagavatam tells us, or the personalism, the personalist position, is that we don't have to try to enjoy this world. Don't try to enjoy this world. That's the materialist. The personalists don't even try to escape the world. But what the personalists do is they try to engage with the world. They realize that we're here, we have a Swadharma in this world, and we also have a Sanatan Dharma, which is going on beyond this world, an eternal duty. And therefore, what they do is they perfectly integrate these two purposes, their Swadharma in this world and their Sanatan Dharma in the eternal world. And therefore, they're able to engage in this world in a very, very beautiful way. And therefore, personalists have an incredible contribution to make in this world, and they have an incredible prospect after this world as well. And so in this purport, Srila Prabhupada is explaining that this is the position of a personalist. They understand why this world exists. They understand how this world exists, but more importantly, they understand why this world exists. And therefore, they're able to engage in this world and simultaneously understand what lies beyond this world. And in that way, we can say that these are the four broad ways in which to understand this world that we're living in. So the material world, Krishna describes in the Bhagavatam or in the Bhagavad Gita to be dukhalayam, isn't it? Mamupetya punarjanma dukhalayam ashashvatam napnuvanti mahatmana samsiddhim paramam gata. Krishna says this world is temporary and it's miserable. Now, sometimes people hear this and they say, your philosophy is pessimistic. Now, is the philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita, is the philosophy of the material world that's given in the Bhagavatam, is it pessimistic? It's a good question. Or is it realistic? Is it actually what the reality is? Or is it optimistic? Is it actually very, very empowering and uplifting? That's the question. Actually, if we look at the description of the material world, then actually it's all three of these. The description of the material world, is it pessimistic? Yes. Because the philosophy of the Bhagavatam tells us, don't try and find happiness here. Don't try and find fulfillment here. Don't try and find a paradise here. You may try to make a technological paradise, a fictional paradise. You may try to create all kinds of comforts and conveniences, but it's never going to work. And therefore, the Bhagavatam is definitely pessimistic when it comes to one's attempts to try to find happiness here. But more than that, we can say that it's not just the philosophy of pessimism, but it's actually realistic. Because if you look at the world in which we're living today, although on the external, it may seem like it's not that bad, the reality of what's going on in this world, how much people are suffering, how much struggle they have to go through, how much inside of them there is a vacuum, even when externally everything seems to be good. This world is a case of smiling faces, crying hearts. And therefore, the philosophy of the Bhagavatam is not just philosophically pessimistic, but it's practically realistic, because you see that actually no one is actually happy in this world, no matter how much they might try to convince you. Statistics and the real data on the ground shows people are not happy. And therefore, the Bhagavatam's position of the world as a miserable place is not just pessimistic, but realistic. But even more than that, the Bhagavatam's position that the material world is a temporary and a miserable place is actually supremely optimistic, because what it is it explains that it's specifically engineered in that way in order to take us to a place which is eternal and full of bliss. In other words, the ultimate position of the Bhagavatam is supremely optimistic, because it doesn't just end with the suffering of this world, but it sees that the suffering of this world is part of the journey which is meant to take us to the realm in which there is no suffering. And therefore, it's ultimately an optimistic philosophy, because it sees that this experience is part of a greater plan to take us to a place which is so much better. In the purport, Prabhupada says, Krishna wants the living entities to experience rasa and to ultimately enter the beautiful rasa lila of the material world, of the spiritual world. And so the ultimate thing is that the philosophy of the Bhagavatam is supremely optimistic, because it takes us to the eternal place where we're all meant to be. And so these were some points that I wanted to share with all of you today about the verse in question and the Bhagavatam, and the explanation not just of how this universe comes about, but also why this universe comes about. And maybe for the last 10 minutes, I'll just stop to say a few things about Jiva Goswami, because it is Jiva Goswami's disappearance day today. And then what I will do is I'll open it up, and then we'll have a bit of discussion. Is that okay? So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to switch over to my to the laptop. All right. So yes, here we've been learning all these amazing truths of the Bhagavatam. And Jiva Goswami is known as Tattva Acharya. Different associates of Mahaprabhu, they were empowered in different ways. So Rupa Goswami was known as Rasacharya. Haridas Thakur was known as the Namacharya. Raghunath Das Goswami was known as the Prayojanacharya. And Jiva Goswami, his specific speciality is that he was known as the Tattva Acharya. Tattva is a very beautiful word. It means truth, but specifically it means truth that stands true in all times, places, and circumstances. People think things to be true in this world, but they're all relative truths. But when you find a truth that stands true in all times, places, and circumstances, that type of truth is known as Tattva. And so Jiva Goswami, of course, as we know, was one of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan. And his specific speciality was that he wrote profusely.
Sometimes I say the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan were masterminds of bhakti. They were masterminds of bhakti, number one, because they had mastered their own minds. That's the definition of a Goswami, one who has conquered their mind. But they were also masterminds because they knew the mind of their master, Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam. But they were also masterminds of bhakti because they knew how to masterfully reach the minds of all living entities through their writings. And therefore, Jiva Goswami was an incredibly prolific author. One interesting fact is that there was only one person in creation who penned and wrote more verses than Jiva Goswami, and that's Vyasadeva. After Vyasadeva, the next most prolific author in the history of creation is Jiva Goswami. It's said that he penned nearly, I think, something like 400,000 verses, like huge amounts. And so Jiva Goswami, an incredible personality, someone who really carried forward the legacy of his superiors. There's one South Indian Acharya, his name is Pillai Lokacharya, and he says, how do you understand who is a true disciple of the Guru? Because many will claim to be disciples of a Guru, but how do you know that someone is actually a disciple of the Guru? And he says a true disciple will be known in 3 ways. He said the first thing they will do is they will carry forward the intellectual legacy of the Guru. That means they'll carry forward the writings, they'll forward the philosophy, the literature, the teachings. The first thing that a disciple will do is when they speak, they will carry forward the intellectual legacy of the Guru. He says the second way you know someone is a true disciple is what they will do is they will carry forward the physical legacy of the Guru. The Guru in his time establishes projects. The Guru establishes temples. The Guru establishes communities which become places where people can live this philosophy. And the true disciple will continue and carry forward that physical legacy. They'll maintain those projects, they'll take care of them, and they'll expand them. And he says the third way you know someone is a true disciple is that they don't just take forward the intellectual legacy, they don't just take forward the physical legacy, but what they do is they take forward the fame of the spiritual master. In other words, they live their life in such a way that when people see them, they become a living glorification of their own spiritual master. And they conduct and carry themselves in such a way that their spiritual master becomes even more glorified by the way that they embody Krishna consciousness. So, dear friends, as we meditate on becoming better disciples, we can remember these 3 things. And we meditate on Jiva Goswami, who did all 3 of these things. He took forward the intellectual legacy of the Goswamis and he expanded it. Not just that, he took forward the physical legacy. Jiva Goswami was an incredible manager. And in Vrindavan, so many of the temples and so many of the aspects, the valuable assets of the Goswamis were under threat. And so Jiva Goswami made legal agreements, he made managerial systems, he made all kind of practical arrangements so that the physical legacy of all these temples would be maintained. And not just that, Jiva Goswami became someone who, just by his own spiritual purity, was a living glorification of his spiritual teachers.
So Jiva Goswami is an incredible personality. All of the Goswamis, they were incredible because they almost had these paradoxical aspects to their personality. On one side, they were extremely humble, meek and humble. And on the other side, they were incredibly smart and streetwise. They were like the best managers. On one side, they were simple sadhus, just living in a, in a very, very simple way. And on the other side, they were like these powerful spiritual leaders that even kings were surrendering to. On one side, they were extremely deep. They were just going deep into Shastra. They would chant, they would read, and they would get lost in the Bhagavatam. And then on another side, they were just going out into the world, managing, organizing, expanding, innovating in the world. On one hand, they were kind of absorbed in the spiritual reality of Vaikuntha. They were Jivan Mukta. But on another side, they were just so human, so caring, so down to earth. It's explained that the Goswamis would walk around Govardhan and they would speak to all the villagers, and when did your daughter get married? And how's your father's health? Just talking about very human things, although absorbed in the spiritual reality. So you can see they were incredible personalities. And Jiva Goswami, his book Sat Sandarbha. Sandarbha literally means to weave, like you have the Jarasandh. Jarasandh means who the demoness Jara sewed together. So Sandarbha literally means weaving together. And so what Jiva Goswami did in the Sat Sandarbha is he took all the main Siddhanta of all the different scriptures and he weaved it all together in one book. And the very first book of the Sat Sandarbhas is known as Tattva Sandarbha. And in Tattva Sandarbha, what Jiva Goswami does is he systematically explains why Bhagavatam is the ultimate praman. Srimad Bhagavatam pramanamamalam prema pumartho mahan. That if you want to learn anything, then you ultimately have to go to the Bhagavatam, because the Bhagavatam is Sarva Vedanta Saram Hi, is the essence of all Vedantic philosophy. So like this, it's an incredible contribution that Jiva Goswami made. And so today we're remembering how he was an incredible disciple, because he took forward the intellectual legacy, he took forward the physical legacy, and he took forward the fame of the spiritual master. And our South Indian Acharya, Pillai Lokacharya, he says, this is how you can understand who's really a disciple, because they dedicate their life in this way. Okay, so I think it's been about an hour now, so I don't want to speak much more than this. Sahadev Prabhu, I hand over to you if we want to have some discussion, and then we can kind of take it from there.
Of course, we're going to have some discussions. Thank you so much, Maharaj. Dear devotees, I am pretty much sure that everybody was kind of hooked, very rapt in listening to Maharaj. So if anyone may have questions, reflections, comments, realizations you may want to ask or share, please indicate by using the hand emoji or your physical hand, and you'll be asked to unmute to ask your question or share your reflections. Well, Maharaj, if I may open the question up. One is, again, thank you so much. I'm an African, and now I'm in the States. I attended school in Africa, and I attended school in the States also. And I see mostly there is a big difference in the sense that in Africa, you have teachers. In the US and European countries in general, you have lecturers. And there is a big difference. You did not lecture us today, you taught us today. And we're very much grateful teaching us, especially how you were describing about Jiva Goswami writing his Sandarbha and explaining what Sandarbha means, weaving. And it's very interesting how you also, in your humble state, weaved through the immense depth of philosophy that we have, which cuts across all philosophies, all sciences. And I know that I'm not a pure devotee. I'm a struggling devotee, but I just can't imagine what I did or what actually promoted me to get to where I am at this moment, in this present life, of being a devotee, studying under the tutelage of Jagat Guru Param Guru Srila Prabhupada. So whatever the reason may be, I give thanks to such things or such beings. My question, Maharaj, is the 4 quadrants that you drew with 2 quadrants having the real and unreal, which is the material world real, the material world unreal, the spiritual world real, the spiritual world unreal, which leads to materialism and nihilism. Now, my question is, where does one fall into if one believes that the material world is real and the spiritual world is real? Where does such a person fall into?
Yeah, in one sense, that is our position.
Yes.
It's interesting because the Bhagavatam says the material world is unreal as well. But that needs to be contextualized. It's unreal in the sense that it has no existence in eternity. And therefore, remember I was talking about tattva, and I explained how tattva is something which stands true in all times, places, and circumstances. So in one sense, the Vaishnava position is that the material world is unreal because it doesn't last. And if something doesn't last, then it can't be said to be really real. However, the Vaishnava position is that the material world is also real, but it's temporary. And therefore, this is real. Like this computer is real. Like it's not an illusion. It's not just Maya. I mean, it is Maya in the sense that it's the material energy. But Krishna says, Mama Maya, Duratyaya, it's my energy. And in this purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that it's Krishna's energy. So the Vaishnava position is that position, the personalist position, that the material world is real, that the spiritual world is real, and that the material world, although temporary, has a very, very real and tangible benefit to give to the conditioned soul. And actually, the idea is that when one functions in the material world, but with spiritual consciousness, then the material world becomes like the spiritual world. Like, for example, Prabodhananda Saraswati, what does he say? Vishvam Purna Sukhayate. That when I look around at the material world, every direction I look in, I see only happiness. And then on the other hand, the Bhagavad Gita is saying Dukhalayam Ashashvatam is full of misery. So which one is true? The devotee actually spiritualizes the world by seeing the whole world as an opportunity to serve Krishna. And therefore, the material world becomes very real, but in a way that brings one closer to Krishna. So yes, that is the position of the personalist. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Because as I was looking on the screen and following the diagrams, I was trying to figure out which angle I belong to. and I realized that I belong to this and I belong to that.
We
Like,
have tendencies of all of these, actually.
yes,
Yeah, we have, even though these are philosophical positions,
yeah,
you know, like we would not ascribe to the philosophy of atheism. We are not philosophical atheists. However, we can become psychological atheists. Because if we begin to act in our life in such a way that we're trying to take Krishna out of the picture, which we do, then we are ascribing to the position of atheism, even though philosophically we don't accept it. So therefore, we can also sometimes be atheistic in our psychology, or like that. Or sometimes we can also become impersonalists, you know, not just maybe in philosophy, but in the way that we interact with the world, interact with other living entities, interact with our surroundings. We may say, I'm not an impersonalist, but say, for example, if there's a devotee who ascribes to Vaishnava philosophy, but then we begin to neglect the environment, you know, like say where we just start throwing rubbish on the ground, then in one sense, we're not impersonalists, but we are impersonalists because now we're dealing with the earth, which is divine, which is the mother, which is Krishna's energy, which deserves respect and which deserves reverence for providing everything that we needed in our life. And now we're just interacting with the earth in a very impersonal way. And therefore we become impersonalist. And therefore, I think you're right. Some of these tendencies can come in, even though philosophically we may not take that position.
well, thank you so much, Maharaj. But I had a question on Jiva Goswami. I'll be quick, so we may go to His Grace Sriman Varacharya. That is, Jiva Goswami, such a prolific writer, yet he was, materially speaking, he was a nephew to Sri Rupa and Sanatana Goswamis. Now, my question is, how does it happen that two uncles accept one of their nephews and allow the nephew to work with them almost on an equal level, even though they understand it that, hey, this is our nephew. I mean, it could be my son. But as young as he is, he is capable of doing what we're doing, and we can even assign him to do some other things that we probably may not be interested in doing, but he will be happy doing it and may even do it much better. And they brought him together to themselves. Now, how do we as modern day devotees learn from such a relationship where sometimes someone obviously is a senior devotee in terms of age and when this person joined, but there is another younger devotee in terms of biological reasons and time this individual joined, but looking at the capabilities of such a devotee, bring such a devotee along and work together with such a person. What do we learn? And if we learn anything, how do we go about it?
Yeah, such a great point. Yeah, I love your points, Dev Prabhu. You're very thoughtful and very practical and very beautiful as well. The Goswamis had spiritual vision.
And therefore, when they were interacting with each other, there was the immediate identities with which they were interacting, and then there was the deeper understanding of their ontological identities in the spiritual world. They were all manjaris, they were all eternal associates of Krishna. And therefore, they also appreciated each other, being able to see beyond the material frame and seeing on a spiritual level that each one of them were exalted associates of the Supreme Lord. So I think that's one thing. That's a lesson we can take away. Srila Prabhupada once said, if you knew who the devotee sitting next to you was in the spiritual world, then you would faint. So we tend to look around at everyone and judge them based on their current material persona. But actually, remember, every soul is amazing and every soul is an eternal associate of Krishna. And therefore, don't underestimate anyone. Like every devotee has incredible capacity. So I think that's one lesson we can learn, to try to see beyond material identities. But I think the other great lesson, Dhira Dhira Janapriyo Priyakaro Nirmatsaro Pujito, that this quality of being non-envious was such a hallmark of the Goswamis. You know, they say to feel distress or to feel compassion in someone else's distress is hard, but to feel genuinely happy in someone else's success is even more hard. And therefore, this non-enviousness by which the Goswamis were able to see the incredible gifts that someone had been given by Krishna, and then to be able to then fan that and encourage that and honor that. I think that is one of the great qualities of a Vaishnav that we learn. And here we see in Jiva Goswami, although, as you mentioned, younger in age, younger in experience, younger generationally, they saw that he had been invested with a great potency by Krishna to perform a specific task, and therefore they promoted that and encouraged that without any sense of enviousness. And so I think it's just another great exhibition of how non-envious the Goswamis were, and how when one has this non-envious spirit, then they can begin to see how Krishna has invested himself in each living entity and to be happy for that living entity. Yeah, some thoughts.
Well, as always, thank you. Thank you so much, Maharaja, for the answer. So we may go to His Grace Sriman Varacharya Prabhu, please. You may unmute.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj, Krishna Sevam
Hare Krishna,
Bodhisattva. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. It's a pleasure having you on this platform. It's a pleasure having you here. We're very grateful for your presence and the wonderful wealth of knowledge that you always share. And so we always look forward to it. So in your analysis of the four types of philosophy, I mean, so the real, the unreal, and the nihilistic, etc. I was going to ask a question, but then Sadi Prabhu asked something similar, and in your answer, I feel much satisfied in your answer because it's always very difficult to actually defend that the scriptures do not give us pessimistic view of the world. It's very difficult. Many people hold that idea that this is just being too pessimistic. And then, so the question I was going to ask was maybe I don't know. So in your answer to his question, you mentioned something about the scripture says, but Krishna says, Dukalaya Aswasatam. And then there's an acharya you mentioned. I was driving, so I couldn't get it.
Yes.
Yeah, so he said that I see happiness all around me. And I'm very happy you actually said that. I'm very happy you gave us that, because my question was going to be, and I've asked that question on this platform before, I think to Mahatma Prabhu, or I don't know, one of the great Prabhus, and he was actually, flabbergasted about the question, that I really don't know. So my question was going to be, where do we really belong as Hare Prabhu? Because on one hand, we are preaching about the temporariness of this material world not being real and temporary, and then we are preaching about the spiritual world, eternal, sweet, paradisical, etc. So that's also like the same concept in Christianity, where people say, you suffer in this world and you go to enjoy in the world, in the spiritual world, and people finally realize that this is like some future post-dated check. It doesn't make you to really live happy.
There. Happiness is in the next world.
So actually, many people have started rejecting that. It does not satisfy them. So are we also not falling into that category? So I remember when I asked that question, I was trying to ask Mahatma Prabhu to tell us, where do we belong? Are we in that category, or are we also, is Krishna consciousness coming us happiness here now, or in the hereafter? And both will be very difficult to actually defend. But then your answer to Sade Prabhu's question, very satisfying. Now, why I'm bringing this up again is the fact that we have the scriptures, right, as our guide. But if you don't have simply people to explain them to us, we can get astray and we can actually draw the wrong conclusion. Mm. And in many cases, this happens. So I'm very happy that you rightly mentioned that even though Krishna said that this material world is Kalaya Asaswatana, but a decently person said, all around me, I see happiness, which means that it's a matter of consciousness how we use what Krishna has given. It's a matter of consciousness. Otherwise, if we get into this duality of good and bad, heaven and hell, we get stuck. So I appreciate that fact, and I hope that we can develop more and more of this vision that everything Krishna does is perfect. Om Punamadam Punamidam. And this phenomenal word that has come from him is also perfect, perfectly equipped for a purpose. So that gives solace to the heart, knowing that whatever Krishna has done is actually perfect, and we can take advantage of that. But if we want to see the bad, the ugly, we want to continually see the opposite of things, then of course we'll always get disillusion eventually. So it's just appreciating your answer, that it gives me more satisfaction hearing that, and also maybe you have something more to say to clarify some of the points. Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you so much, Acharya Prabhu. Really appreciate that comment. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. On one hand, that's why I said, is the Bhagavad Gita pessimistic? From one point, yes, philosophically, you can't be happy here. But then as we go to a deeper understanding, then we realize if we change our consciousness and the way we interact and look at this world, then we can actually begin to experience even bliss here. Because I give you another example. In the Bhagavatam, in the 5th canto, the material body is described in a Sanskrit word, klesha da. Da means to give, and klesha means misery. So the Sanskrit word for the material body is literally that which gives you misery. But the interesting thing is, 2 cantos later, the material body is called artada, that which gives you incredible benefit. So now, here we have in the Bhagavatam, in the space of 2 cantos, 2 words describing the material body,
One, that the material body is simply giving you misery, and the other one, that the material body is simply giving you benefit. And the point is, how do you utilize the body? If you abuse the body, if you exploit the body, if you try to use the body for material enjoyment, then know for sure, klesha da, that material body is going to give you misery. But if you use the material body and the intelligence you've been given to learn Shastra, to serve the Vaishnavas, to do selfless acts for others, then that material body is a great tool which is given to you, which gives you great benefit. And therefore, it's not the material body in one sense that is arbitrarily good or bad, but it just depends on how you utilize it. And we could say the material world is exactly the same. If you try to exploit this world, if you try to enjoy in this world, if you try to manipulate and hoard and simply enjoy everything, then the material world, you'll experience it to be temporary and miserable. But if you realize this material world is given to me as an opportunity to serve, then when we utilize everything for service, then Vishwamburna Sukhayate, we see happiness everywhere. So yeah, I really appreciate your point that it all depends on consciousness.
Well, Hare Krishna Maharaj, I have a question regarding to Srimad Vajrayana Prabhu's comment and question and your expansion on his comment. There is this story of how in one of the early rulership of Maharaj Yudhishthira, there were 4 thieves, 4 guys. They were all together, they stole, and they were arrested and were sent before Maharaj Yudhishthira. And he punished them differently. He gave them different punishments. And Shakuni was actually making mockery of him, saying, I told you, this guy is not qualified to be a king. 4 people together stole, and you're punishing them differently, giving them different punishments. But in that pastime, we understand that Maharaj Yudhishthira punished them accordingly because of their statuses. You know, if someone is a Brahmin and he steals, you don't punish him the same way as a Sudra who steals the same thing. So, in this material world, we understand that different types of people may react to this material world differently. Like in the case of Maharaj Yudhishthira, even though they received different punishments, but they were all punished in any way. So my understanding is that in this material world, we may have different views, different feelings, but ultimately, this is a place of misery. And one speaker was speaking on this very platform, and a similar theme came up. And the issue was, this is also part of Krishna's kingdom. If one begins to feel and live that way, then this place is Vaikuntha. But the issue here is that we do not have Jagai and Madai in the spiritual world. But here we have Jagai and Madai. Nityananda was having bliss. But there were these rascals who came and then cracked his head open. So I may be blessed in my own self, but there is another crazy guy somewhere who will come and trouble me. Therefore, Hare Krishna, sorry. Therefore, these 3 aspects of pessimism, optimism, and realism, I see how they work, but I think that ultimately one of the three should reign supreme as the reality of this world. And if that is the case, which one is it, Maharaj?
I think, no, that's why I gave you all three words, because I think in the material world, how can you be simultaneously pessimistic and optimistic? That's the general. But I think a devotee can be simultaneously pessimistic and optimistic about different aspects of the world. We're pessimistic when it comes to our ability to control the world and to create a kind of a sense of stability and no problems. When it comes to that kind of endeavor, we're like, I'm pessimistic about that. But we're optimistic about the idea that whatever ups and downs there are, if I bring Krishna in, they tell us peace is not an absence of anxiety, but the presence of divinity in every situation. And so we're optimistic that if I bring Krishna in at every moment, then doesn't matter what happens, I'll be protected, and I'll be my consciousness will be merged in that happiness. So I think there's a way in which to be simultaneously pessimistic about the nature of the world, but optimistic about the prospect of the world. And that prospect is always there, that you can bring in Krishna at any moment. And as soon as you bring in Krishna, Om Pavitra Pavitro Va Sarvavastham Gadopi Va Yasmaret Pundarikaksham Sabha, then everything becomes purified. Even the material world, as soon as you bring in Krishna. So we're optimistic that Krishna makes himself so available that we can bring him in anywhere. But we're pessimistic that I'll be able to control everything that goes on here and create this kind of externally this very uniform situation. No, the material world is unpredictable and it's uncontrollable. So I think, both things go side by side.
Well, thank you so much, Maharaj. So in that case, I think His Divine Grace, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada Maharaj, was actually testing his disciples, and the disciples actually passed the test, because there is this story about a guru who was preaching so strongly against impersonalism. And his disciples heard a word from other sources that he's been targeted by these impersonalists. And this Maharaja said, no, I do not see anything wrong. Nothing will happen. And eventually, he was killed by this impersonalist. So there is this Leela of Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj also, who was preaching so strongly, so heavily, and he was targeted. And they were actually chasing after him. I'm sure this is a very popular story. And the disciples told Maharaj, you have to switch your sannyas clothing with us. No. And Bhaktisiddhanta was reluctant. He said no. But the disciples, like quote unquote, forced him, and then they switched. And in this way, they were able to say. So this is what I'm saying, is that within oneself, you may be in place, but
the externals you can't
control. The externals we cannot control. So I think this is what makes what you shared with us very, very useful tool, that we all can try to use this tool to live our lives as devotees in this material world. That we do not just begin to assume that because we're trying to serve Krishna, everything is rosy and Krishna is always going to be by our side. So thank you for sharing this with us, Maharaj.
It's too one-dimensional, no? If you're only pessimistic, it's too one-dimensional.
And if you're only optimistic, it's almost like too one-dimensional as well, because the world doesn't work like that. And therefore, you'll find that like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur will say, make statements like, you know, the material world is like a toilet. You do your business and then you get out, you know. He'll say it's no place for a gentleman. But he'll make very strong statements. But then in other places, he'll make the statement that, you know, for a devotee, it doesn't matter. They can go to hell or they can go here. It's all the same. It doesn't, you know. So,
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Anyone else with something to share? I think I saw Dr. Hassan's hand up. Are you still there? And do you still have your question? Sometimes our questions get answered even before we ask. So maybe. Thakur Murari Prabhu.
Yes, Hare Krishna, your grace.
Okay, all right. Okay, go ahead.
Maharaj, can I accept my humble, respectful obeisances? All glory to Gurudev, all glory to Prabhupada, and all glory to the wonderful assembly devotees. I think the question I wanted to ask is already answered because I wanted to ask about when you said that there's nothing in this material world for us. And at the same time, when you are answering His Grace Srimad Bharat Prabhu's question, you would mention that we have this material body here. It's opportunity for us to utilize it for Chris. So I think it was not just nothing. So my answer was a question. That's why I put my hands down. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thakur Murari Prabhu, please you may unmute.
Krishna Maharaj, please accept my obeisances and the other devotees on the platform. So thank you for your presentation, and I had the opportunity to listen to you online and different, temples. So I'm happy to hear that I'm on the channel with you. And thanks for those very nectarian discussions. And we are greatly blessed and fortunate to have your association. So thanks for your presentation. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Well, Hare Krishna. Thakur Murari Prabhu, thank you so much. We have His Grace Govinda Prabhu signed up. Govinda Prabhu is our modern day Garuda. Even though we are not Vishnu, but he is our Garuda. Please go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna, Govinda Prabhu.
Yeah, Maharaj, please kindly accept my respectful obeisances. Glories to you. Glories to Srila Prabhupada. Glories to assembled devotees. Maharaj, my question, you said something that struck me very much, because I know that to plant a seed is very easy. Very, very easy to plant a seed. And for that seed to become more profitable to the sower requires cultivation. So the seed needs to be cultivated for it to grow, matured, and bear fruits and all that. So you said something that struck me very much, that we are using electricity in our rooms and kitchens, and we are benefiting so much from the electricity. But at the same time, this electricity can be very, very disastrous, can be very dangerous, it can kill us. And so as we try to utilize this electricity for the betterment of our lives, we also have to be very careful. Otherwise, we can also die from the same electricity. The scripture talks about the association of devotees. And from the association of devotees, we can become devotees. But at the same time, the point I'm trying to make here is the point that you chip in the fact that someone asked Srila Prabhupada a question, and Prabhupada tried to answer him by saying that if he know the devotee that is sitting in front of him or besides him, he will be very, very careful. And so we are dealing with this ourselves as devotees, but actually we don't know who is who. And most of the time, we deal with ourselves on the externals, and we've forgotten the internal aspect of those external bodies that we are dealing with as devotees. Sometimes a devotee may act to my conscience, to my understanding, very wrong way. And so as a conditioned soul, try to come out from that conditional state. I may not understand him. And as a result of that, I may react negatively. I may think about that devotee not on a devotional aspect. And so I may try to belittle that devotee or, act in a way that is not going to be more devotional because of his own devotional activity according to my understanding. And you also said that in all circumstances, we have to bring divinity in all aspects of our dealings, and that will make the state of our mind peaceful. So how do we deal with this aspect of a devotee acting wrongly? How do we deal with the situations like that so that instead of benefiting from that devotee, we don't entangle ourselves since we don't know who is who?
Yeah, thank you so much, Govinda Prabhu. This is such a nice point. You see, whenever we're dealing in the world, there's two aspects. There's the practicality, and then there's the spirituality. And we have to bring these two together. So say, for example, if you're overseeing a project and someone is acting in an inappropriate way, then there's the practicality of how to deal with that personality. We can't just be transcendental in that situation. But at the same time, one must always maintain the vision of who I'm dealing with on a spiritual level. And this is the hardest thing because how to bring that, and that's why I said the Goswamis were so incredible because they were almost rooted in a spiritual vision and at the same time incredibly practical. Like on one hand, you have Jiva Goswami who has no envy, who has just sees beyond everything, sees everything in its spiritual essence. And at the same time, he's writing legal agreements, he's writing wills, he's defending against, Mughal invaders, does both side by side. That's very incredible. Like, how do you manage to embody both visions side by side? So therefore, I think what's important for a devotee is to always begin with the first identity. The first identity is that I'm a spiritual being and everyone's a spiritual, a soul in relation to Krishna. We have to begin there. And then what other ways in which we have to function with someone, they are just the practicalities of dealing with them on a day-to-day level. But behind all of that, we have to understand everyone is a spiritual being. Therefore, we are devotees first, managers second. The moment you become a manager first and a devotee second, you could get into the realms of aparad. Therefore, devote first. And then the roles and the responsibilities that we take on, we act with practicality, but first seeing the spiritual essence. And it's hard. It's hard because sometimes someone's material functioning becomes so loud that we're not able to see their spiritual essence because it's so agitating to us. But we have to be able to also within them maintain that vision. So yes, thank you for raising this. It's a great challenge for all of us.
Well, thank you so much, Govinda, for your question. And Maharaj, thank you so much for the answer. This particular question is being discussed a couple times on this platform because it's quite dicey. It's very important for devotees to avoid offenses. And at the same time, too, it is very important that devotees stand to their principles. And in discussing this, I recall a pastime where Lord Chaitanya, while he was growing up, his parents thought he was kind of a special child. He is a different child. And people were telling his father that your son is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he said, he may be the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he is my son. I have to discipline him. Mm-hmm. And so we are trying to be devotees. We live in this material world. And just like Maharaj said, if there is a project going on and someone is sabotaging it, and I begin to say, well, this guy here sabotaging it is Narada Muni. Who am I to interrupt Narada Muni? And I let go of, excuse me to say, his nonsense, then nothing gets done. So thank you so much for the answer, because there are so many things I read from Vanipedia, because this question has been asked several times. And Srila Prabhupada ordered in many instances that the devotees should defend themselves. You know, and reading His Holiness Giriraj Swami Maharaj's book, I'll Build You a Temple, we see what Maharaj and the few devotees went through to make the temple, the Jiva temple, the temple as it is today. So thank you so much for, of course, as always, this depth and practical wisdom shared with us today. And with that, we go to His Grace Hare Chakra Prabhu. Maharaj, we hope we're not holding you longer than we should. We would like to have you as long as possible, Maharaj, but we don't get you many times.
Yeah. Before I Chakra Prabhu come in.
Okay, Govinda.
Maharaj, please, how do we also, devotional service is so powerful that it protects everyone, both devotees and even demons, and all kinds of beings. And so sometimes the demons also take shelter in devotional service. Some people come in as devotees, but in actuality they are not. But they are in devotional service anyway. And so the demons, we all know what they can do. They cause atrocities. How do we identify the behavior of a demon who is pretending to be a devotee and a real devotee who is also acting like that of the character of a demon? How do we identify both?
Yeah, this is it's a challenge. It's a challenge. I think we have to, even with demons, those who are acting in a way which is harmful to others. In Shastra, we find many times that by the potency of Vaishnav Sangha, by the potency of the spiritual energy, even they can be turned, they can be transformed. I think we always have to give an opportunity, whatever it may be. I find it like very, it's very interesting that Vasudeva and Devaki, even after Kamsa had killed all of their children, when they saw in that moment that maybe Kamsa had changed, he had become a little bit repentant, they were ready to forgive. And it's interesting that the very first symptom of bhav that Rupa Goswami writes about, kshantir avyartakalatvam. Kshantir, sometimes it's translated as forgiveness. So what I would say is that it's the hallmark of a devotee never to shut the door on anyone, to always give an opportunity, to always see that potentiality that if Krishna comes into someone's life, they can change. And I think when we begin from there, seeing that there's always potentiality for people to improve, then I think we are able to deal with people more appropriately. But within that, if someone is clearly harming others, if one is clearly doing something, then as a matter of compassion to them, we have to reprimand them. As a matter of, you see, even when a Vaishnav is heavy, even when they're disciplining, even when they're seemingly cracking down on someone, it's still coming from a place of compassion, because they're realizing it's necessary to do this at this point in order to ensure that this person doesn't degrade their mentality further. And so even when a Vaishnav is being heavy because someone is acting out of line, even that heaviness should be coming from a space of compassion, because ultimately every Vaishnav acts to try to bring out the best in others. So yeah, it's hard in practice, but yeah, these are some thoughts.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Maharaj.
Yes. I gave hearts to Govinda Prabhu's question because I think it's a very interesting question. Hare Chakra Prabhu, please you may unmute.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna, Hare Chakra.
All glories to you.
All glories to you.
All glories to Gurudev, all glories to Prabhupada, and all glories to the assembly. Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you very much for this class. When we hear things like this, then it revives us to be able to continue with whatever little we are trying to do. Yeah, my question is in line with all what you've been asking, especially the one Sahadev asked and Svayam Bhagavan Prabhu also continued. When you were describing the Goswamis, when you were saying three things that actually someone is really a disciple of a spiritual master. Yeah. And one of the things is that the person shows extraordinary compassion. Like, even though they are very highly spiritually situated, but they come down to interact with people, see how they are faring, how everything is happening in their day-to-day life. Yeah, that aspect is where my concern is. Because many a time, when a devotee even tries to maybe go interact with his biological family members, or something happens and the devotee is trying to extend a helping hand, then other devotees will start talking that, no, Krishna consciousness, devotional service is not, what do we call it? It's not philanthropic act. It's not a philanthropic act. And attachment to family is not good for you. You don't forget about the family and continue with your devotional service. A perfect example is even Sahadev himself. One time when he lost his mom or somebody, and he wanted to go back home to, be part of the ceremony. And he was being discouraged by devotees. No, this is Maya. Why do you have to go and interact with these karmis and all that? So that aspect, sometimes I get a little bit bewildered. That simple thing that even some people who don't even call themselves devotees of the Lord, something that is so simple and common amongst them, that they try to extend some sort of compassion, some sort of help, let's say help. And we as devotees, don't want to do that by calling it that is
a material consideration.
Material, yes. Sometimes I get
It's
so
such a good
bewildered by
point.
that.
Yeah, no, I totally, Prabhupada, he dedicated his books to 3 different personalities. One of them was Baladev Vidyabhusan, a great acharya. Another one was Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, his spiritual master. But the interesting thing is, the Krishna book, if I remember correctly, Prabhupada dedicates it to his own father, Gaur Mohan Dey. And you think, like, Prabhupada, you're a sannyasi, you're beyond all these, you became socially dead, you cut off all of these ties. Why are you now dedicating your book to your father? You're beyond all of that now, no more material consideration. This is love. We are connected on a deeper level. So when a devotee, I feel in our movement, we need a lot of humanity. What's often happened is sometimes we become so seemingly transcendental that we forget to be kind human beings. And sometimes I've seen the most insensitive behavior in communities where we're supposed to embody the deepest sensitivity. And so I totally agree. Thank you for raising this, Hari Chakra Prabhu. Like, sometimes I feel our movement would advance a lot more by just being nice to each other and just being like a little bit normal and just interacting in a humane way. And so, yeah, I think even with our family, so many of our sannyasis, even though they had taken sannyas, when their parents were in difficulty or when their parents were leaving the world, then they went there. They went to do that ceremony. Radhanath Maharaj, he took the ashes of his father and he did the ceremony personally and he immersed them into the Ganga. Because a Vaishnav is never ungrateful. You see, the point is that as Vaishnavas, we're grateful. So many personalities gave us so much benefit in our life to bring us to where we are now. So how can we be ungrateful? We have to show our appreciation. And so whether it's family or this or that, we try to show our gratitude by being very human and kind. So yeah, thank you for raising this nice point.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. Now we have our queen, Grace Mitravinda Devi. Mitra, please you may unmute. Hare Krishna.
Dearest brother, thank you so much. Quite unnecessary. Hare Krishna, everyone. Please accept my obeisances. All goes Gurudeshwar Prabhupada. Maharaj, it's wonderful to see you here. It's absolutely wonderful to see you again. I'm going to get my brother Sahadev for not announcing it to me earlier. I just want to thank you for the energy that you emit, even without speaking. But when you speak and share in this way, it's completely enlivening and supportive to our spiritual nervous systems. For me, it like just once a year, I'd like it for it to be more, but it carries me for quite a long time. I appreciate your sincerity and your knowledge and your emotional maturity that translates and helps us to understand how we should act spiritually. My question is, as it was for Draupadi when she was dragged into the assembly, it's written that we should not mimic Vaishnavas. However, there are these times when devotees feel we should not do anything because we don't want to offend. And in not doing that, we create the biggest offenses. I'm only I'm a jiva in a female body. I'm 5 feet tall. But I have absolutely no problems speaking up for or doing whatever's necessary if I saw a child harmed or a woman harmed in a room full of jivas in male bodies who would choose to do nothing. I personally have had an instance where I experienced something and no male said anything. So how can we move beyond the education of Shastra that is misunderstood, miseducated, to come to the platform of doing what is absolutely necessary in as many instances as possible, because we are imperfect, but having like this, the true education of Shastra means, doing the necessary when necessary. How do we understand that? You speak in a way that truly gives us information on care and compassion, but there's also that perspective of standing up, speaking up, and showing up in a way that resonates with this beautiful process of love and protection of the five: women, children, elderly, brahmanas, and cows. If we don't do that, then how are we standing in front of congregations speaking as leaders? How are we showing up in community and telling people to do this and do this? Come follow us. Come follow us. Come follow. When and again, not a criticism, but I want it better for my children, for my children's children, for the children. I mean, I was a Sunday school teacher for 12 years in my area, and just in general, how can we do that? Please. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thoughtful question as always, and thank you for your kind words. I was mentioning before, I think we need a lot of humanity. Recently, I gave a talk called Humanity and Transcendence, and I was talking about how morality, of how, personal dealings, how these things are often underrated within the Vaishnav community because we feel like we're beyond all of this. I really appreciate this platform, specifically ISKCON Africa platform, because I always find that the questions after and the discussion that ensues brings high philosophical topics into a very, very practical arena. And I think by having more discussions like this, we all become more aware of what it means to live this Shastra in our life. I think the other thing we need is just incredible examples of love and compassion. It's explained in the Mahabharata. You talked about Draupadi, and it's explained dharmasya tattvam nihitam guhayam mahajano yena gatasa pantha, that the secrets of dharma are hidden within the hearts of the Vaishnavas. And therefore I feel like that's why the living Bhagava is so important. Because what happens is if we're only reading the book Bhagavad, but we don't see the living Bhagavad, we don't see how they apply those teachings, how they breathe those teachings, we don't see the compassion, the love, the selflessness within which they function, and we don't see that sometimes they also do act in ways, they will be angry sometimes and they will speak out and that's completely spiritually in line because they're expressing the Shastra in a way that needs to be expressed at that situation or moment. I think we need those examples. So therefore, I would say two things to bring lofty Shastric concepts and make sure we're applying them in very relevant ways. I would say two things. One is open-hearted discussion about what's really going on in our movement, in our communities, and how we can bring those interactions more in line with our cherished principles. So I think those discussions. And I think the second thing is we just need examples. We need examples of people who are just living Bhagavatams, living theologies. And by seeing how they interact in situations, how they respond, how they carry themselves through difficult situations, how they respond, I think that educates us better as communities how we should be applying Shastra appropriately. Some ideas,
big question, but thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Maharaj, and thank you so much, Mitravinda Devi. Maharaj, in fact, just last night I was listening to one of your profound interviews with this guy, Ranveer. And actually, for some reason, what I was listening to is what we're discussing here, because you were discussing with this podcaster that spiritualists should not forget about humanity. And that is one mistake some of us do most of the time, like Hare Prabhu was saying. And yeah, I lost my own biological mother, and my temporal authorities at the time discouraged me from going to the funeral. And I was, and I still am blessed. I do not understand why, because I don't do anything to deserve blessings from the Lord. But I told my temporal authorities that you telling me not to go, but I will. I will go, and I did go. And thankfully, His Grace Govinda Prabhu here, he accompanied me. And we beautifully represented ISKCON to the family. And my question is, Maharaj, sometimes, because we live in this material world, sometimes we know a little bit about the truth because we study in the scriptures and we hearing the philosophy from different personalities. The Lord sometimes inspires us from within. And sometimes when you see, maybe I will have to speak to you directly later on, because I cannot explain everything here at this point. We've already been 2 hours here. I cannot explain everything, but I would like to explain certain things to you directly, so you may have a better clue as to why. Because some of these questions coming out today are not just, for excuse me, say philosophical questions.
They're very practical.
They are real things happening to some of the devotees. And therefore, devotees, when we have an opportunity to have a personality like your humble self, we would like to have our doubts and questions cleared. So I will say that on behalf of all the devotees gathered here and whoever may be watching this, either now or later on, Maharaj, we've learned from the scriptures that when the devotees of the Lord speak, the Lord listens. So our humblest request to you, Maharaj, is that you pray for all of us that under all circumstances, we never ever forget Krishna, and we never ever betray or disappoint Jagat Guru Param Guru Shri Prabhupada. This is our humblest but sincerest prayer to you, Maharaj. We need this prayer so badly. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Devotees, if anyone does, I think it is okay. Maharaj has given us so much of his time, and Maharaj would like to ask you to say some concluding words, and then we may bring this to a close. And we can't thank you enough, Maharaj, and we hope to have the association in the very near future again. Hare
Thank you
Krishna.
so much, Sadhguru Prabhu. Well, what can I say, dear Vaishnavas? It's always an honor to be with you all. Satam Prasangan Mamavirya Samvido, in the association of like-minded, sincere Vaishnavas, the narrations of the Lord become very, very powerful, and they remove the fog in our consciousness. So
It's always wonderful to be with all of you because I find you all to be such thoughtful, not just philosophical, but very deeply thoughtful and practically trying to understand how does this all work in real world. And it's really refreshing to be amongst a company like that. I feel like when I come on, I learn so much myself. So thank you for the opportunity, and wishing you all greater success in your devotional endeavors and greater strength internally. And may you find clarity in many of these questions that we've discussed today so that we can serve Srila Prabhupada, serve our spiritual teachers, and serve the community in better ways. Thank you, everyone. Looking forward to being with you again soon.